The desert smelled of iron and ash. After hours of marching across the shattered valley, our squad had grown used to the sight of scorched machines and collapsed fortifications. Nothing surprised us anymore. The war had ended, or so the ceasefire claimed, but the battlefield didn't know peace. It still breathed ruin. We were sweeping in a long, thin line, our boots kicking up rust-colored dust that clung to our armor and skin like dried blood. The heat shimmered in waves, making the outlines of my comrades waver and bend. Command wanted us to confirm there were no survivors, human or alien. Everyone assumed there wouldn't be. I told myself the same thing until I saw her. It began with a flicker of light beneath rubble. Not the glint of broken glass, not the dull shine of a spent shell casing, but a faint pulse of blue, like water catching a hidden moon. I slowed, squinting. At first I thought it was just another ruined drone, but as I knelt and brushed away the dust with my gloved hand, I uncovered armor. Alien armor. Smooth, layered, with faint veins of bioluminescence running across it like living circuitry. And beneath that armor, still alive, was her. A warrior. Female, by the structure of her features, though her kind didn't map perfectly onto ours. Her skin was pale like stone carved by centuries of wind, streaked with faint markings that could have been scars or ritual etchings. Her mouth was pressed into a firm line, but her eyes were open. They fixed on me with a clarity that made the rest of the battlefield fall away. For a moment, I froze. She wasn't supposed to be alive. Behind me, Keeler's voice cut through the dry air. "Ward, don't waste time. Mark it and move on." She barely looked at the body. Her scanner beeped once and delivered its cold verdict. Non-transportable. Unknown biosigns. High risk. The medbot rolled forward, its lenses swiveling, mechanical arm extending to hover above the alien's chest. A pale blue light scanned across her armor, humming softly. Then the bot spoke in its neutral, unfeeling tone. "Subject alive. Neurological paralysis detected. Full motor function compromised. Armor fused to dermal tissue. Transport not recommended. Prognosis: terminal, if left unattended." Keeler sighed, already turning away. "There you have it. Not worth the trouble. Command doesn't want liability. Tag it, Ward. We've got a schedule." And just like that, the rest of the squad moved on. Their figures disappeared into the heat haze, their chatter crackling faintly over comms. I was left kneeling beside her. The medbot lingered, waiting for me to confirm the tag. Its lens tilted, scanning her again, its programming as rigid as doctrine. But she was looking at me. Her eyes were unlike anything human. Dark, yet shot through with threads of pale silver, as if stars had been ground down and mixed into the pigment. They blinked once, slowly. Then again, deliberate. I swallowed hard. "You can hear me, can't you?" Another blink. Slower this time. Something in my chest tightened. This wasn't random nerve activity. She was aware. I lowered my voice, as though speaking to a wounded comrade. "I'm Elias," I said, tapping my chest. Then, almost without thinking, I touched the earth flag sewn on my shoulder. Human. Her gaze followed the movement. Her throat worked, strained against paralysis, and a sound escaped, a faint, high-pitched note, fragile as glass. It wasn't a word I knew, but it was voice. The medbot interrupted, its monotone cold. "Sergeant Ward, do not engage with the subject. Tag and proceed." Keeler's voice came over the channel, sharp and impatient. "Ward, what the hell are you doing? You know the rules. Leave it. It's not our problem." But her eyes held me in place. They weren't pleading in the way human eyes might, but they carried something undeniable. Awareness, intent, will. I remembered another war, another body. A boy pinned under rubble, his legs crushed. Protocol had told us not to move him during an active extraction. We left him with a promise that medical would come later. 3 hours after we pulled out, a mortar struck the courtyard where he lay. I had carried the weight of that memory ever since. And now here I was again. "Command," I said into my comm, my voice measured. "Echo 7 contains 1 Xeno casualty. Alive. Paralysis. Not transport capable per medbot." The reply was instant, clipped, bureaucratic. "Affirmative. Tag and proceed." "Understood," I said automatically. But I didn't move. Instead, I shifted closer, crouching until I could see the faint rise and fall of her chest. Her armor vibrated gently beneath my glove, a hum of some built-in life support mechanism still clinging to function. Her lips moved, just barely, a shape of sound without strength. I leaned in, straining to hear. "Rheva," she whispered, a fragile thread of syllables. It was a name. Her name. I felt my throat go dry. "Rheva," I repeated softly. Her eyes closed and opened in what I could only believe was recognition. Behind me, the medbot chirped again. "Sergeant Ward, protocol violation detected. Subject classified as enemy combatant. Unauthorized assistance is prohibited." Keeler's distant voice carried across the ridge. "Ward, quit playing hero. You'll get yourself written up." I ignored them both. My hands were already moving, pulling an emergency tarp from my pack. Carefully, I worked it under her broken armor, sliding inch by inch so I didn't jolt her body. Every movement was slow, deliberate. Dust scraped under my knees, cutting into my palms. The medbot warned again. I didn't care. Finally, the tarp was in place. I anchored it with thermal line, fashioning crude straps into something resembling a cradle. My breath came harsh and uneven, but I kept working. Her eyes never left mine. "You're not a corpse," I muttered, echoing words I hadn't realized I was saying aloud. "I won't leave you." The squad was long gone now, their outlines swallowed by heat and distance. I could still hear faint laughter over the comm channel, as if they were already forgetting what they'd abandoned. I looked back at Rheva. Her gaze was steady, unwavering, even in her broken body. I thought of command, of the tribunal that would surely come if I disobeyed. I thought of the boy I hadn't saved. And then I thought of this alien warrior, paralyzed and forsaken, yet still fighting to exist with nothing more than the movement of her eyes. For the first time in months, something inside me hardened not into bitterness, but into resolve. I would not refuse her. I gripped the tarp straps tighter, feeling the weight of my decision press down on me. The battlefield stretched wide and merciless around us. But in that moment, it no longer mattered. There were only 2 of us left in that hollow of dust and ruin. A paralyzed alien warrior named Rheva, and me, a human soldier named Elias. And against every order, against every regulation, I knew exactly what I would do. I was going to save her. The moment I decided to save her, the battlefield changed. The air felt heavier, as though the dust itself disapproved. Every step, every sound seemed louder now, as if the desert wanted to broadcast my defiance to command. I knew the truth. From this point forward, every action I took would pull me further away from the safety of obedience and deeper into the uncertain gravity of conscience. Rheva lay still, her chest rising with faint effort, her eyes unwavering. There was no way she could walk, no way she could move. If I left her here, she would be dead within the hour. The heat alone would finish what the paralysis had begun. I tightened the tarp straps around her armor, careful not to crush the fragile seams where alloy met skin. Her suit vibrated faintly under my touch, a steady hum of failing machinery, still fighting to keep her alive. "I need you to trust me," I murmured. My voice sounded strange in the silence, too human, too soft for this desolate place. She blinked once. Slow. Deliberate. That was all the permission I needed. The medbot whirred, adjusting its lens. "Sergeant Ward, your actions are in violation of Protocol 34. Immediate cessation required. Rejoin sweep line." "I heard you," I muttered. Then, louder. "Override advisory. Manual responsibility assumed." "Override denied," the bot droned. Liability cannot be transferred. Any damage to subject will be logged under your designation. I almost laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Liability. That's all she was. To them a risk, a statistic, not a person, not even an enemy worth respecting, just an obstacle to paperwork. Fine. If Command wanted to wash their hands, I'd stain mine. I activated the collapsible med sled I carried. It unfolded with a metallic snap, its surface glowing faint amber. Designed for human casualties, it wouldn't recognize Rheva's biosignature. Sure enough, when I tried to load her vitals, the panel flickered red. Unregistered life form. Transport locked. Not today, I muttered. Pulling out my field knife, I pried open the side plate, exposing a nest of wires. With a sharp tug, I severed the recognition filament. The sled chirped in protest, then powered into passive mode. No more safety locks, just raw obedience to physics. I slid the tarp and Rheva onto it inch by painstaking inch. Every scrape of armor against stone felt like a crime. She made no sound, but her eyes flicked. Once, then twice, holding me in silent dialogue. I didn't understand the code, but I felt the meaning anyway. I am still here. Do not stop. When I finally secured her onto the sled, I exhaled as if surfacing from deep water. Sweat stung my eyes. My arms trembled with effort, but my heart steadied. The first step was done. The next problem: getting her out unseen. My squad had disappeared into the haze, their chatter faint through comms. They thought I was behind them, finishing a tag. If I returned now, maybe I could invent a lie. But to drag Rheva openly across the ridge? Impossible. They would see. They would report me. I scanned the horizon. To the east, the remains of the hydroponics facility lay like broken ribs against the dust. Its roof panels were shattered, but the structure still cast shade. I remembered stashing supplies there once. It was out of the drone's usual scan path, forgotten. Irrelevant. Perfect. Hold on, I whispered. We're moving. Gripping the sled's handles, I leaned my weight forward. The sled responded, humming across the ground, gliding over sand and grit better than I expected. Still, the terrain was uneven. Every ridge jarred through my arms. Every dip risked overturning her fragile body. The medbot followed at a cautious distance, its programming unwilling to abandon me. It repeated its warning every 30 seconds, like a metronome of disapproval. Sergeant Ward. Violation recorded. Return to line. Return to line. I ignored it. My focus was on Rheva. Halfway across the valley, the shadow of a drone swept over us. I froze, my pulse thundering. The machine glided above, indifferent, scanning the battlefield with its cold camera eye. To it, we were just shapes, heat signatures against the dust. But somewhere, someone might be watching that feed, wondering why one human lingered behind with a body he should have abandoned. I crouched low, pulling the sled under the skeletal remains of a collapsed crawler. Its rusted frame groaned as the wind shifted. For long minutes, I waited, heart hammering, until the drone passed. Only then did I move again, dragging Rheva inch by inch toward the broken facility. Inside the ruins, the air was cooler, heavy with the ghost of old water. The hydroponic vats stood empty, skeletal frames gathering dust. Shafts of sunlight pierced the cracked ceiling, turning the motes into falling stars. I guided the sled to a shadowed corner, away from the doorway, and finally allowed myself to collapse onto my knees. My lungs burned, my arms ached, but Rheva was alive, still breathing. She blinked at me slow, deliberate. Her lips twitched as if trying to form words, but only a faint exhale came. Rheva, I said, repeating her name softly, anchoring it in the air. You're safe, for now. Her eyes softened, the closest thing to relief I'd seen. I pulled off my canteen and attached the adapter hose, praying it would fit. The port on her armor resisted, then clicked with a reluctant seal. Water flowed, and the filaments along her suit pulsed faintly brighter, like veins awakening. She closed her eyes, just for a moment, as though savoring the smallest mercy. You're welcome. I whispered. The medbot hovered in the doorway, refusing to enter due to structural instability. Its lens glared like a silent accuser. Sergeant Ward, command requests explanation for deviation. Return to sweep immediately. I muted the channel. For the first time in my career, I cut command out of my ears. The silence was shocking, almost sacred. Now it was just the two of us. I sat beside her, resting my back against the cold vat. The weight of what I had done pressed on me, heavier than any pack I'd ever carried. By saving her, I had condemned myself. Court-martial at best, execution at worst. And yet, looking into her eyes, I felt something stir that had been absent in me for years. Conviction. She had been abandoned by her own people. We had abandoned her, too. But still she clung to life, her gaze steady, her name whispered into existence like a fragile vow. I thought of all the orders I had followed blindly, all the lives written off as non-transportable, all the ghosts I carried. Not this time. I leaned closer, lowering my voice as if confessing to her alone. I don't know what happens next, but I won't leave you. Not here. Not like this. Her eyes glistened, and for the briefest moment, I could swear I saw gratitude raw, wordless, powerful. That was the first step, the first crack in the armor of obedience I had worn all my life. Defiance had begun, and there was no going back. The ruins smelled of damp metal and dust, like a forgotten cathedral to technology. Shafts of light pierced the broken ceiling, slicing through the gloom in pale ladders. Dust motes swirled, rising and falling as though time itself hesitated here. Rheva lay motionless on the sled in the farthest aisle of the abandoned hydroponics wing, her armor dim but still alive with faint pulses of light. Every few moments the filaments along her ribs glowed, then faded, sinking with her shallow breaths. Her eyes remained fixed on me, unblinking, patient. I crouched beside her, wiping grit from my brow. My muscles trembled from hauling her this far. My lungs burned. But the true weight pressing against me wasn't physical, it was the realization of what I had done. I had cut myself loose from the chain of command. The comm unit on my shoulder chirped, a harsh reminder of the world outside this sanctuary. I hadn't responded to command in over 20 minutes. Too long. They would notice. They had noticed. "Sergeant Ward," came the voice, clipped and cold. "Status report. Your sweep data shows deviation. Confirm your location." I stared at the comm. My thumb hovered over the response key. If I lied, they might believe me for now. If I told the truth, they'd send a detachment immediately. And if I stayed silent, suspicion would bloom like rot. I looked at Rheva. Her gaze didn't waver. I pressed the key. "Echo 7 clear," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. Marker set, moving to rejoin line. A pause. Too long. Then, "Copy. Hurry it up, Ward. Don't fall behind again." The channel clicked off. I let out a slow breath, leaning back against the vat behind me. That bought us time. Not much, but some. I turned my attention to Rheva. Her lips parted slightly as though she wanted to speak, but no sound came. Paralysis held her still, but her eyes burned with something fierce. I leaned closer. "You understand what's happening, don't you?" A blink. "Long. You know I broke orders for you." Another blink. "And if they find us?" My voice trailed off. The image of a tribunal loomed in my mind, the cold gavel of military justice slamming down. Desertion, treason, words heavy enough to erase a man's life. Her gaze softened, not pity, not fear. Something else. Recognition. "Rheva," I whispered, repeating her name. "I need to move you again, somewhere safer. This place won't hold long." She blinked twice. Short. Urgency. Agreement. That decided it. I stood and paced the length of the ruined chamber, forcing my brain to work. An escape plan. I needed one. Option 1. Stay hidden here. Wait for nightfall. Risk patrols and drones, but darkness would be cover. Problem. My squad would sweep back eventually, and command would scan the area again. We'd be discovered. Option 2. Move her now. Deeper into the ruins. The old tunnels beneath the hydroponics facility might still connect to the service corridors of the colony. If I could get her underground, heat scans wouldn't pick her up. Problem: the tunnels were unstable, half collapsed, risk of cave-in, and dragging her through tight spaces would be hell. Option 3. Call in falsified coordinates. Pretend I had moved on. That bought time, but eventually the truth would surface. No option was safe. But then, neither was leaving her behind. I returned to her side. "We're going underground," I said, more to myself than to her. "It's dangerous, but it's the only chance." Her eyes flickered with faint light as if in answer. Before moving her, I had to stabilize her further. Her breathing was shallow, labored. The paralysis wasn't total, her throat muscles still fought, faintly, but the rest of her body was locked inside its own prison. I opened my pack, pulling out the medgel canister. It wasn't designed for alien physiology, but maybe it could reinforce her failing systems. I held it near the port on her armor, hesitated, then pressed it in. The gel hissed, dispersing in a thin mist. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then the filaments along her arms brightened, faint but steady. Her chest rose slightly deeper. Her eyes fluttered closed, then opened again with renewed focus. Relief surged through me. "Good," I whispered. "That's better." The comm crackled again, making me flinch. "Ward, your signal shows stationary. You said you were moving." "Damn." They were tracking my transponder. "Glitch," I answered quickly. "Terrain interference." Adjusting now. Silence. Then, "Copy. Don't lag." I exhaled. My hands shook. They're watching closer now. That sealed it. We couldn't stay here. I secured Rheva to the sled again, tightening the straps, making sure her airway vents were clear. My jacket was still under her head, now stained with dust and sweat, but I left it. It was all I had to cushion her. "Ready?" I asked, even though I knew she couldn't nod. Her eyes blinked. One long, one short. I chose to believe it meant yes. I pulled the sled toward the back wall, where a collapsed section revealed the dark mouth of a tunnel. Cold air drifted out, smelling of rust and damp earth. Perfect. Hidden. The sled groaned over debris, metal scraping stone. I winced with every sound. If a drone passed overhead, it might hear. At the tunnel's entrance, I paused, looking back at the chamber one last time. Sunlight streamed through the cracks, painting golden stripes across the floor. For a brief moment, I thought it looked like a chapel, and Rheva, a fallen saint, carried from the altar. Then I stepped into the dark. The tunnel swallowed us whole. The walls were close, concrete reinforced with metal ribs, half corroded. Water dripped somewhere, echoing softly. My boots crunched over fallen rubble, each sound magnified in the silence. I dragged the sled carefully, maneuvering around collapsed beams. Rheva's eyes followed the ceiling, watching shadows shift. "You've been here before, haven't you?" I asked quietly. "These tunnels. Your people fought here." Her gaze slid toward me, a faint shimmer in her iris. I imagined the battles that had raged above, the clash of her kind and mine, and wondered what she saw now when she looked at me. A savior? A fool? Both? We stopped at a junction where the tunnel split 3 ways. My lamp cut across the darkness, revealing faded markings in alien script scorched into the wall. I turned to Rheva. She blinked long, then short twice toward the left corridor. "You know these tunnels," I realized. "This was your stronghold." Her eyes glimmered faintly in confirmation. "Then you'll guide us," I said. "1 blink for yes, 2 for no, long for left, short for right. Deal?" She blinked once, deliberate. Agreement. For the first time, I felt like we weren't just 2 strangers thrown together by chance. We were partners now. We moved deeper into the tunnels, Rheva guiding me with her blinks. Left, straight, right. The path twisted like a buried serpent, but with her help I avoided dead ends. The further we went, the cooler the air became. The hum of her armor steadied. My fear ebbed slightly, replaced by focus. But then my comm hissed again. Ward, your signal is moving off designated grid. Explain deviation. My stomach clenched. Think fast. Pursuing false marker. I lied. Drone picked up heat signature. Checking it out. Another pause. Then, negative. Return to line immediately. That's an order. Silence pressed around me. My thumb hovered over the comm. One answer could seal my fate. I looked at Rheva. Her eyes met mine, steady, unwavering. She blinked once. Long. Choose. I cut the comm. The channel went dead. The weight of that silence crushed me. I had just crossed the line from defiance to desertion. Command would know. They would send someone. But for now, in the dark of the tunnels, there was only us. I knelt by Rheva, brushing dust from her cheek where it had settled. There's no going back now, I whispered. Her lips trembled. A faint sound escaped. Broken but real. Why? The translator at my collar caught it, rendering it in halting English. The word struck me like a blade. Why? Because I was tired of leaving people behind. Because I couldn't watch another pair of eyes fade into nothing. Because, against all logic, against all orders, I believed her life mattered. I leaned closer. Because everyone else refused. And I won't. Her eyes glistened. She blinked once. Long. Then again. I didn't need translation to understand. Thank you. And so the escape began. 2 fugitives, 1 human soldier, 1 paralyzed alien warrior moving deeper into the earth, hunted not by enemies, but by the very command I had once sworn to obey. The first step of defiance was behind us. The second would demand everything we had left. The silence in the tunnel was deceptive. On the surface, the world might have looked abandoned, just dust, ruins, and broken machines. But silence in war is never emptiness. Silence is the sound of something preparing to move. I had cut the comm. That one act had been enough to mark me. By now, command would be staring at the flat line of my transponder and wondering why 1 soldier had vanished into the ruins. A sweep unit would already be on its way. Drones would circle lower, their lenses searching for betrayal. And betrayal was exactly what I had committed. Rheva lay on the sled behind me, her chest rising in shallow rhythm, her eyes following every flicker of light from my lamp. She couldn't speak, not fully, but her gaze carried something sharper than words. Trust. It terrified me more than any tribunal could. The tunnels tightened as we moved deeper. Metal ribs curved overhead, scarred with scorch marks from battles past. My lamp threw shadows like black bars across the walls. Each step echoed too loudly, as though the corridor wanted to announce my presence to anyone listening. At every junction, Rheva guided me with her eyes. 1 blink for left, 2 for right. Sometimes she simply stared down the path I should take, and I followed without question. Strange, how quickly trust can be built when necessity welds 2 lives together. We reached a wider chamber, half collapsed, filled with debris from old hydroponic tanks. I paused, catching my breath. My arms ached from dragging the sled, but I couldn't stop long. If command had deployed drones, they'd already be sweeping this sector. I crouched beside Rheva. Her lips parted, and a faint sound escaped broken syllables, filtered through the translator at my collar. Danger! Above. The device stuttered, filling gaps with static. But the meaning was clear. I switched off my lamp instantly. Darkness swallowed us. Only the faint bioluminescence of Rheva's armor glowed, pulsing like the heartbeat of a buried star. Then I heard it. The low thrum of rotors. A drone. The sound grew louder, vibrating through the concrete. Dust drifted from the ceiling, stirred by unseen air currents. Somewhere above, a drone hovered, searching, I pressed my back to the wall, pulling the sled closer into shadow. My own breathing felt deafening. Rheva's eyes caught mine, steady, calm. She had lived her whole life under pursuit. For her, this was familiar. For me, it was a plunge into treachery. The drone's searchlight pierced through cracks in the ceiling. White beams sliced into the chamber, sweeping back and forth. One sweep lingered too close. The edge of light brushed across Rheva's armor. Her filaments flickered in response. Panic surged in me. I yanked my jacket off and flung it over her chest, dimming the glow. My pulse thundered as the light passed on. For a long minute, the drone hovered. The hum was unbearable, as though it could feel me crouching here, heart hammering, betrayal dripping from my skin. Then the sound faded, growing distant. We waited in silence, neither of us daring to move until the echoes were gone. Finally, I let out the breath I'd been holding. That was too close. Rheva blinked once. Long? Agreement. The reprieve was short-lived. My comm unit crackled to life again. The channel forced open remotely. Sergeant Ward, Command's voice snapped. Your transponder signal is irregular. Report immediately. Confirm your status. I stayed silent. Failure to respond will be considered desertion, the voice continued. Repeat. Confirm your status or face consequences. My thumb hovered over the key. If I answered, I could buy time, but every word risked exposing my position. If I stayed silent, they'd escalate the search. I looked at Rheva. Her eyes glistened in the dark. She blinked once. Long. Choose. I cut the channel again. The silence afterward felt heavier than stone. We couldn't linger in this chamber. The drones would sweep again. And soon, soldiers would follow. We need to go deeper, I whispered. Hide where they won't think to look. I scouted ahead, lamp dimmed, and found another tunnel sloping downward. The air was colder there, carrying the faint scent of water and earth. Perfect. Dragging the sled was harder now. The floor was uneven, strewn with rubble. My arms burned with each pull. Sweat ran into my eyes, stinging, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Rheva watched me with unwavering patience. Sometimes I thought I saw guilt flicker in her gaze, as though she blamed herself for my struggle. I shook my head. Don't. This is my choice. Her lips trembled. A whisper escaped, soft but clear through the translator. Why? Risk? I froze. Because I couldn't watch her die. Because I was tired of being the soldier who obeyed at the cost of humanity. Because, for the first time, I saw an enemy as more than a uniform. But all I said was, because everyone else refused. Her eyes softened. That was enough. Hours blurred in the tunnels. Time lost meaning in the dark. My body moved on instinct, dragging, guiding, resting only when my muscles gave out. At last, we reached a cavernous chamber where the ceiling had collapsed, creating a hollow shielded from scans above. Rusted pipes hung like ribs. Pools of stagnant water reflected faint light. This will do, I whispered. I guided the sled into the shadows of the far wall and collapsed beside it, chest heaving. My body screamed with exhaustion, but relief cut through it. For now, we were hidden. Rheva's eyes roamed the cavern, then settled on me. She blinked once, slow. Safe. But safety was fragile. Somewhere above, command would be mobilizing. I could picture it. Keeler reporting my absence, officers frowning at the data feed, drones triangulating heat signatures. Soon, they would send a squad into the tunnels. The hunt had begun, and I was their quarry. I pulled my rifle close, checking the magazine. I wasn't planning to fight, not unless I had no choice. If they found us, I couldn't hope to win against my own squad, but maybe I could delay them. Maybe I could buy Rheva time. I looked at her again. She couldn't move, couldn't run, but her eyes shone with a determination that made my own resolve burn brighter. We'll make it, I said softly, as though speaking it could make it true. One step at a time. She blinked once. Long. Agreement. Above us, faint but growing louder, I heard it. Boots on stone. They were coming. And the hunt had only just begun. The first bootfall above us came like a dropped coin in a cathedral, small, bright, impossible to ignore. Then there were more, overlapping rhythms, careful steps that knew how to listen to their own echoes. Command had stopped being a voice in my ear. Now it was breath and weight and purpose on the stone overhead. Down, I whispered, forgetting for a heartbeat that Rheva could not move. My hands were already on the sled's handles, angling her deeper into shadow where the ribs of old pipework hung like a rusted curtain. The faint pulse in her armor dimmed under my jacket, the way you shade a candle with your palm. We had stolen minutes, maybe an hour, by cutting the calm. The desert had taught me every debt comes due, usually with interest. Here the interest arrived as the soft churn of a drone's rotors, knitting the air, and the dry rasp of a familiar voice that carried better than it should. "Flash left," Keeler called. "Mind the drop. Ward's tag should be here." But he didn't set it. Eyes up. They had brought her. Of course they had. Logistics officers don't chase in movies. In real war, they chase when the ledger starts to bleed, and my name was a red number in her column. I scanned the chamber by reflex, sketching a map of paths we hadn't taken yet. 3 tunnels. The center sloped down to a dark seam in the rock where the concrete ended. The left one pinched narrow before widening again. The right was half collapsed and breath still. Dust lay undisturbed on the fallen beams like frost. Rheva's eyes slid left, then down, not a blink this time, a gaze that tugged like a compass needle. "Left," I murmured. She answered with a single long blink. Agreement? Or plea? Or both? The sled's runners complained as I pivoted. I held the handles low to keep her weight close to the ground, where friction helped more than it hindered. The lamp stayed off. The world reduced itself to textured dark, cold metal under my palms, the whisper of fabric over stone, the soft mechanical bellows of her suit. A conical beam cut the chamber behind us, drone-light, white and hard, making a map of every edge. It snagged on the dangling pipes where we'd just been, and clung there, searching for shape. I kept moving. In the dark, even brave men become pilgrims. All motion becomes prayer. We reached the pinch point. The tunnel narrowed until the sled couldn't pass flat. I turned it on its side, muscles burning, the straps thrumming with the strain. Rheva's eyes never left my face. There is a point in every impossible task where you decide to believe physics loves you. I pressed my shoulder to the sled, exhaled everything I was not using to live, and shoved. The runners caught. The sled slid through with a groan. A boot scuffed stone behind us. Closer now. I could hear leather and breath. "You see that?" Another voice, Rafi. If my bones remembered right. He always sounded like he had a grin in his pocket and a cigarette he'd never light. "Jacket over something. That's Ward's." No one else wears his collar half off. "Ward!" Keeler called. No comm now, just voice. It sounded different without the tin, older, more human, which I resented. "This is Logistics Officer Keeler. You want to ruin your life. Ruin it on your own time. Don't draft us into it. Come out. Leave the body." The body. "My name is Elias," I muttered, mostly to Rheva and the tunnel. I hate when they make things smaller to carry them easier. She blinked, a slow, long press of her lids that felt like a scent. I heard the drone shift angles. The beam poured deeper, panning. Dust motes glowed like a snowfall no one had earned. I pulled the sled faster, the metal ribs scoring the concrete. The tunnel forked. Left. Right. I stopped because choice is the only thing that drowns you if you let it. Rheva glanced left, blinked once, then pointed her gaze down at a shallow alcove in the right wall. Almost nothing. A maintenance recess with a corroded panel. "You want," I began. Then "shut up." The panel. I dropped to one knee and wrenched. The weakened hinges gave with a sound that made my teeth hurt. Inside, a square shaft, old service riser, a ladder eaten to lace, the air upwelling cold and wet. She had known it would be here. Of course she had. This was her ground once. How far? I whispered. Her eyes lifted, then fell. Then lifted again, up, down, up like measuring. Then one long blink. Far. Perfect, I said to no one sane. The shaft was too narrow for the sled as it was. But the sled was smarter than it looked, a modular frame that could scissor narrower, turn into a harness if you swore at it enough. Above, boots at the threshold. A beam washed the tunnel. I killed my breath and listened to the light, trying to find the right to see me. Raffi, take 2, sweep right, Keeler said. Ward's a literalist. You love me, Raffi answered. His voice was closer. He would be in this tube in 30 seconds if I didn't make something between us that would teach him patience. Loud trick, I whispered to Rheva. Sorry. I pulled my knife, found a thin steam line the drone's beam had silvered into visibility, and opened it. The pipe exhaled. At first a cough, then a steady white breath. The tunnel filled with mist, warm enough to touch my skin, thick enough to confuse heat sensors for a minute. The drone's light turned it into a pale cloud. The sound covered the soft scream of metal as I folded the sled. My jacket stayed over Rheva's chest. I slid the harness under her, fitting strange geometry to stranger anatomy, the way you learn the shape of a new tool by how it hurts your palm. The straps took her weight without protesting. I fed paracord through the top rung of the ladder and tied a brake hitch my first sergeant had taught me in a storm that ate our tents and our patience. I clipped the other end to my belt. If we went, we would go together, like bad ideas and consequences. Raffi's silhouette bloomed in the mist. He raised his hand, the old friendly salute. Ward, he said, not shouting. I know you're making a mess. Don't make me be creative. I leaned into the shaft and lowered Rheva an inch. Metal cried. The harness caught. The rope hummed with new math. Rheva's breath clipped once and steadied. Her eyes left mine for the first time since we'd met and watched the dark mouth below accept her. Ward. Raffi had never used my first name when we were clean. Now he did. He came into view, rifle at low ready, not pointed, a mercy and an insult. His eyes took in the sled parts, the rope, the jacket over a blue glow I had not hidden well enough. He inhaled softly, like a man recognizing a story he does not want to be in. You're done, he said. Keeler's already called it in. They'll forgive a bad hour, not a bad choice. Step away. Let me say I pulled you out of a hole you couldn't climb because you were dizzy and dehydrated and dumb. I'm all 3, I said, except the first and second. He risked a step toward the mist's edge. The drone's beam skittered against his shoulder and turned his plate into moonlight. He saw Rheva then, not just shape, her face under my jacket's edge. He had the decency to flinch internally, a little movement by the eye. She has a name, I said. Rheva. His jaw worked. She has a classification, enemy combatant, non-transportable. You hear yourself? I asked, too quietly to be anything but dangerous. You were not supposed to have a soul when you enlisted. You brought it anyway. Now say that again like a man. I don't get to be a man right now, he said. I have a job. And I have one too, I said. It changed. He thought about the boy we left in another country. I could see the memory's light go through him and not stay, the way some rooms do not have chairs. That was then, he said. This is doctrine. Then doctrine learned nothing. He looked back over his shoulder, Keeler, a shadow. 2 troopers behind her, fanning, their muzzles down but their interest up. He looked at me and did something that made me love him more than I had the right to. He slung his rifle and stepped closer. Both hands raised. Elias, he said. You can't lower her and climb. You'll drop one of you. Your rope's on an antique rung that would fail on a good day. Today is not that day. Do you intend to help? I asked. His mouth opened, then closed. His hands hung stupid and honest in the steam. If I touch your rope, I mutiny. If I break your nose, I can say you fell. Hit me after, I said. Do it well. I fed rope through the hitch, slow, feeling each millimeter with my palm. The shaft breathed cold. Rheva's weight found its groove. The paracord made a sound like bees when it traveled. Keeler's voice cut the mist. "Ward, you're under arrest. We have authorization for enforcement. Stand down." "I can't hear you," I said to no one, because I didn't trust my tongue with truth. I looked at Raffi. "You still carry that flashbang without the collar pin?" He had taught me the trick how technicians did it when they wanted a pop to scare kids, not a blast to kill them. He eyed the fog. "Left thigh pouch." "Thank you," I said. I let go the rope for one breath long enough to lunge, unhook the little cylinder, and roll it toward the far side of the chamber. It landed with a soft betrayal. I counted in someone else's language. At 3, it went off with light and noise enough to clean a conscience. Keeler cursed. Troopers flinched and brought rifles up out of reflex. The drone backed like a spooked horse. Raffi swore because he disliked being impressed. "You're still not getting out," he said mildly over the ringing. "You know that." "Probably," I said. I fed rope. Another half-meter. Rheva vanished to the shoulders. Her eyes found me from the dark, like small planets. I nodded once. She blinked in answer. Slow. A courage I could drink. "Enough!" Keeler snapped. More breath than voice. "Raffi!" "I'm here," he said. He did a thing with his weight that meant he was about to commit to an outcome. He took one more step, close enough to touch my shoulder if he wanted. "I'm going to reach," he said, looking at the rope instead of me. "If I reach, and help, and she dies, that's mine. If you don't, and she dies, that's yours anyway," I said. We had both been under falling buildings. We knew how guilt chooses hosts. He exhaled like a man trying to blow out a candle someone else holds out of his reach. Then he grabbed the rope above my hitch and bore some of the weight. I almost cried from the sudden absence of strain. 2 seconds, he said. And I didn't. "Do you hear me?" "I hear your silence," I said. We lowered Rheva together, quick now, trusting our hands more than the ladder, letting the rope heat our palms with work. She descended like a slow comet. When the rope slackened, we had to decide if that meant the floor or our failure. I fed a little more. "Elias," Raffi said, quiet in the fog. "They'll make you an example." "All right," I said. "You aren't all right," he said. He looked at the mist where Keeler was a patient darkness. "I'll trip when I chase you. I'll fire high and miss. That's what I can give you." I could taste copper in my mouth from the effort and the maybe of tears. "Tie me," I said. 20 seconds. Then, come honest. He nodded, and in that nod was our childhood that we never had together. He wrapped the rope around a rusted strut in a half-good friction hitch and slapped it. "Go." I slid into the hole. The ladder bit my boots. It shuddered like an old man. My shoulders scraped the shaft. The rope hissed through my device. Below, Rheva's armor picked up the little light that fell and gave it back blue. The air was colder, old water cold, cave cold. It felt like a throat we had talked ourselves into. Above, a shape crossed the shaft's mouth. Keeler. She had her pistol out, not the rifle, which meant she wanted to speak before she shot. "Ward," she said, and the shaft wrapped her voice tight and handed it down. "Think about consequences." "I am," I said, which was true in so many directions that I could stand on any of them and not fall. "You're throwing away rank, pension, the neat ending." She sounded almost tender, which was either a last kindness or her way of keeping her fingers calm. "For what? It can't be for love." "It's been an hour." "I have not earned that word," I said. "It is for not leaving." "Progress?" she said. Then, softly to the air above, "Raffi?" "Slipped," he said. "Missed. Bad footing." He could lie like a friend and tell the truth like one too. The shaft ended not in a floor but in a cross duct, wide enough to hold us both. I eased Rheva off the harness as gently as if hard handling would wake something that could not afford to. The duct ran east-west, a vein cut through bedrock. Water ticked somewhere, a metronome no one had wound in years. In the dim, I could see stones embedded in the duct walls, not concrete aggregate natural seams, shot through with lines that gleamed faintly when my light touched them. Rheva's eyes found the seam and widened a fraction. The filaments along her ribs answered, a sympathetic shimmer. Shielded? I guessed. She blinked once, strong enough to be felt as well as seen. Good. We had traded up from hiding to disappearing. I clipped the rope off and gave it 2 tugs. Above, Rafi tugged back, code we had never taught each other in any training. The rope pulled away, snaking up into the world and then gone. It hit me then, like impact. We were now in a place no one else would enter lightly. That is the first definition of a sanctuary. The second is more desperate. A sanctuary is where you run out of your sins and are left only with your vows. I took out my lamp and turned it to the lowest glow. The duck's ribs were marked with a language I did not know. Not the alien script laced into Rheva's armor, a different hand. Old human maintenance code, stenciled once and smeared by time. PWRAUX. East. Pump, sump, south. Service core down. We need power, I told the air. Rheva's suit was a marvel, but it had limits, and I had fed it gel and luck. Both would go dry. A battery. An inverter. Or prayers. I tried to make that last one a joke. It came out a report. I went east first. The duct widened into a chamber that had held a pump once. Cylinders on their sides, valves like brass flowers, all of it furred with corrosion. A panel on the far wall was human standard, half open, wires bare. I touched a tester probe to the bus. No hum. Dead. Of course. Down. Then, I said. The service core wasn't a stairwell so much as a ribbed drop with ladder rungs welded into the backbone. I tied the harness to my belt again, nested Rheva against my chest in the carrier I had made wrong twice, and right the third time. She weighed more than a human of her size. The armor carried history and gravity both. She was inches from my face. I could feel the bellows of her suit move against my sternum, could smell the metallic tang of her breath turned by filters. Her eye ridges brushed my jaw when the duct narrowed and made us closer than strangers should be. I did not apologize. She did not ask me to. We went down. The rungs vibrated under our combined weight, but they held, because sometimes the world is politely surprised. Halfway, I heard something from above, a crackle, a voice, then the blunt percussion of a shot. Not at me. Warning fire, maybe, to write an honest line in a dishonest report. Then more boots. The hunt had put on its serious shoes. At the bottom, the air changed. It stank in an old way, stone and mildew and a sweetness like rot. The core opened into a natural pocket cave that the colony engineers had unblushingly violated with conduit and cable. Across one wall, set into the rock itself, lay a scatter of stones that did not belong to geology or human ambition. They were smoother, and each held a seam of dull metal. They looked like the insides of clocks. Rheva made a sound that wasn't a word and didn't need to be. Ow is its own translation. I eased her onto the sled, which I had bullied back into service as a low table. The glow from her suit answered the stones. The stones, in turn, pulsed like a choir clearing throats. Explain, I said, too reverent for sarcasm. She took breath in pieces and let it go, in a shape my translator caught like a falling leaf. Singer stone, it said in my ear. Old place. Quiet the seeing. Quiet the listening. Shielding? I said. This whole pocket is a blind. She blinked once, relief and something like grief. The human panel here had a hand crank older than my grandfather would have admitted to understanding. I set my shoulders, grabbed, and turned. It resisted and then surrendered, and when it did, a low hum crawled through the floor into my boots. Somewhere, something spun up slow, like a tired planet remembering to turn. Lights did not bloom, because this wasn't a miracle house, but a small indicator winked on at the panel's edge. The aux bus thrummed to a life that wasn't proud of itself, but it was life. Let's steal from the past, I said. I dug out the last cleverness in my pack. A universal inverter we used to trick dying gear into thinking they were at a different party. I argued with the plugs, bribed a cable to fit a port it didn't like, and ran a lead to the universal on Rheva's suit. The connection hated itself for working. It worked. A soft change went through the filaments across her ribs, then down her arms. Her breath came easier. Her eyes, which had been bright with a kind of hard clarity that only happens when a body is failing. But the mind refuses, softened at the edges, not losing focus, relaxing, the way a blade does when it is allowed to be metal again instead of an agenda. Better, the translator offered. The word carried warmth it hadn't earned. Better, I echoed. We listened. Above, muffled and mistranslated by layers of rock and the mercy of Singer stone, came the hunt's mutter-chopped commands, the drone's curious whine now uncertain as a child told to find a ghost. The shaft we'd left would take them an hour to clear or decide to abandon, depending on whose appetite for paperwork won. Time, then, dug out of the earth with bare hands. Saturday. It was less sitting than collapsing with grace. The cave accepted my back like a chair someone built with me in mind. For a long half-minute, I did not think. Then thoughts arrived like floodwater. Consequences, I said to the cave. Rheva studied me. Her lips moved. This time when sound came, it was a fraction stronger, as if the charge to her suit had mended a torn edge. You lost? The translator asked, tentative under the weight of alien syllables. Yes, I said, because honesty is either medicine or poison depending on the dosage. I will be, in the way the book writes that word. She blinked, and the slowness of it meant she was choosing words with care. You kept me. That is, not loss. We don't measure the same way, I said. It came out smaller than I intended. Then you learn new measure, she said, tired and amused at once. If she had had the use of her hands, she would have made a map in the air and given it to me. The space between us was small now by architecture and choice. I adjusted the jacket under her head, fingers careful not to catch on seams. The neurolash had turned delicate. Her skin at the temple felt warmer than the air, cooler than mine. Up close, the scars across her brow were precise, like calligraphy on a surface meant to endure. A line of them angled toward her hairline in a pattern that looked like a constellation I didn't recognize. I touched my chest. Elias. She closed her eyes briefly. Rheva, she murmured, not to remind me, but because names become charms when you speak them in places built to hold silence. Your people built this? I asked, nodding at the Singer stone. Her eyes narrowed in thought. Found, the translator said. Made friends with. Good phrase, I said. I keep trying to do that. Me too, she breathed. Boots again above. Then the sound of metal complaining the rung we had left with our weight, perhaps choosing to retire. Keeler's voice came faint and fierce. We do this by the numbers. No heroics. Sniffers up. If they went down, they're still here. Sniffers. Heat-sent machines. They would founder on the Singer stone, but nothing is infallible when someone is angry enough to make it so. I'll buy us more, I said softly. Or less, depending on your math. Rheva's eyes softened. Elias, she said in a cadence that made the name mine in a way it hadn't been a moment ago. Do not break. I won't, I said, surprised that I believed it. I don't bend very elegantly either. A ghost of a smile. You bend now. Learning, I said. The word tasted like new metal. I stood, a slower thing than I wanted the world to see me do. I killed the lamp. The cave lit itself, just enough, from the stones and the suit and whatever was left of our courage. I found the service corps' throat again and the pile of broken braces a meter to the right of it. If I wedged one just so and put my shoulder into the right argument, the top of the shaft would shed some stone in an untidy way that would take a team a while to scold back into sense. Noise, I warned. Rheva blinked once, for go. I set my weight. The way you do when about to make something worse, to make everything else better. The brace moved, then stuck, then leapt. And when it leapt, it told the ceiling a story about gravity that ended in a heavy page turn. Dust boomed down the shaft. Rock answered. The sound made the singer stones hum for a heartbeat, like a choir that had forgotten the words and remembered them all at once. Above, a scramble shouts, "Fall back!" Keeler, furious and efficient. "We stabilize and sweep. No one dies in a hole today." "Today," I said to the cave, which was better at promises than people. I went back to Rheva. The inverter hummed. The bellows kept time. The rope burns on my hands had turned my fingerprints into a new story. I realized I was starving. I realized I was happier than I had any right to be in a place like this. "Rest," I told her. "We have earned an hour, maybe 2. After that, deeper or out. We'll listen to the rock. It knows more than command." She found my face again in the dim and held it, the way you hold something you want to become familiar. "Elias," she said softly. Then a word the translator did not catch, syllables too braided for its small algorithm. It offered me a guess. Oath shelter. "Is that a thing?" I asked, careful, as if stepping near a live current. Her eyes closed and opened slowly. "Between 2, the machine said, making it plainer than she had. "When storms." "It's a good thing," I said. "It is a hard thing," she corrected, and I loved her a little for that precision. We listened to our pursuers argue with stone and doctrine. The singer stone did what it had always done, sang quietly to itself, and made the world's teeth hum instead of bite. In the humming I could hear the past that a long time ago, someone else had come here running and had found that running stops working after a point, and you must learn the art of remaining. I did not pray, but I said, in my head so that no witness could ruin it, "I will not leave you." The vow fit in my chest the way the rope had fit the rung, not designed for it, but adequate when both parties agree to pretend. Rheva's gaze softened as if she had overheard. Above, the hunt began to remake itself into a siege. Below, the depths waited, indifferent and generous. Between, we were 2 points on a line we had drawn ourselves. "Into the depths," I said, because naming a chapter is occasionally an acceptable superstition. "Into," she answered. We rested until rest became restlessness. And then we moved again. The hum of the singer stones settled into me like a second pulse. Each vibration whispered reassurance. Here you are unseen. Here you are uncounted. For the first time since I had pulled Rheva from the rubble, I felt a margin of safety. But safety is never absolute. It is only a pause in the ledger of risk. Above us, command had gone quiet. Too quiet. No more voices echoed down the shaft. No more boots shuffled against the stone. Keeler and her team weren't retreating, they were waiting, calculating. A siege had patience where a soldier didn't. I crouched by the sled where Rheva lay, her armor faintly aglow with the power I'd stolen from the old inverter. Her eyes were brighter now, clearer, as though the charge had burned away some of the fog pressing against her mind. When she blinked, the movement came quicker, more deliberate. "You look alive again," I murmured. Her lips moved. The translator caught the sound, stuttered, then delivered a halting phrase. "Alive. Because you chose." The words pierced deeper than any accusation. I wanted to deflect, to tell her I had chosen nothing, only stumbled into defiance. But her gaze made denial feel like cowardice. "I chose because no one else would," I said finally. "And because leaving you there would have killed something in me too." She blinked long. A silence passed between us that wasn't empty. It was heavy, sacred. The kind of silence that comes when 2 lives brush too close. The cave smelled of old water and rust. A faint trickle echoed through the duct, marking time. I used that sound to steady myself as I unfolded a ration pack. The wrapper crinkled loudly in the hush. I hesitated, then tore it open and held a piece to Rheva's lips. Her throat worked, but the paralysis made swallowing a labor. The suit compensated, drawing the nutrients in through an intake vent I hadn't noticed before. The filaments along her ribs flared gently afterward. "Better," the translator murmured from her weak voice. I almost smiled. Not exactly fine dining, but it'll keep us both alive. Her eyes softened, and for a brief second, I thought she tried to smile. Rest didn't last. It never does in war. The hum of the singer stones faltered suddenly, like a voice catching mid-note. I froze. What is it? I whispered. Rheva's gaze darted toward the far wall, where the stone seam glowed faintly. She blinked rapidly. Short, long, urgency, warning. Then I heard it. A low, rhythmic thrum, distinct from the drones above. This sound came from below, vibrating through the rock itself. Something else was moving in the depths. I stood, gripping my rifle. "We can't stay here!" Rheva's eyes fixed on me, steady, unflinching. She blinked once, long. Agreement. I packed quickly, rations, inverter, rope, everything I could carry. The sled squealed as I adjusted the harness, strapping Rheva tight against it. She weighed more than any human, and my muscles screamed, but adrenaline numbed the pain. The only exit lay deeper. The ducts twisted into a natural fissure, barely wide enough for the sled. I angled us in, the stone scraping my shoulders as I pulled. The air grew colder, damp, with mineral breath. The thrum below grew louder. "What the hell is down here?" I muttered. Rheva's lips trembled. The translator struggled, then produced 2 words. Old machine. Machine. Not alien. Not human. Something older. I swallowed hard and kept moving. The fissure opened into another chamber, larger but irregular, as though carved by both hands and nature. Stalactites hung like teeth. Pools of black water reflected the faint glow of Rheva's armor. And across the chamber's floor stretched cables, thick as my arm, half buried in stone. They pulsed faintly with light sickly green, alive. I knelt beside one, careful not to touch. "This isn't colony tech," I whispered. Rheva blinked long. "Yours?" She blinked twice. Also negative. "Then whose?" Her lips moved, the translator catching only fragments. "Before, both. Before war." A shiver climbed my spine. The war had seemed endless, as though humans and her kind were the only powers that mattered. But these cables suggested otherwise, that something older had once ruled this ground, something that still hummed below. I pulled the sled forward, weaving between the cables. Every time the sled's runner scraped too close, Rheva's eyes flicked sharply, warning me not to touch. I obeyed. At the far end of the chamber, another passage sloped downward. The thrum was louder there, vibrating in my bones. I hesitated, torn. Going deeper meant facing whatever ancient machine lay below. Staying meant risking discovery from above. Rheva blinked once. Long. Then again. She wanted us to continue. "Into the depths," I muttered, echoing my own words from earlier. We descended. The passage spiraled downward, steeper and narrower, until my legs burned with strain. At times, I had to half-carry, half-slide the sled. The thrum became a roar. Then the tunnel spat us out into a vast cavern. I froze, breath stolen. The machine filled the chamber like a buried titan. A lattice of metal and stone, veins of glowing green. Gears larger than buildings, grinding slowly as if time itself powered them. The air vibrated with its presence. "What is this?" I whispered. Rheva's eyes widened. Awe, fear, recognition. The translator stuttered before delivering. "The core." I stared. "Core of what?" Her lips moved again. This time the words were clearer. "Of world." Before I could process, movement flickered in the shadows. Figures, not drones, not command soldiers. Something else. They emerged slowly, shapes draped in ragged metal, half-human silhouettes with mechanical limbs, faces hidden by cracked visors. Their movements were jerky, but purposeful. Guardians, perhaps, of the core. My rifle was in my hands before I knew it. I angled the sled behind me, shielding Rheva. The nearest figure cocked its head, emitting a metallic rasp. Its visor glowed faint green, reflecting the core's light. "Stay back!" I warned, voice low. It stepped closer. Rheva's eyes darted, panic flashing for the first time. She blinked furiously. Short, short, long, long, urgent. "What?" I hissed. The translator managed a single word from her broken whisper. "Run." But there was nowhere left to run. Behind us, command hunted. Before us, the guardians of the core stirred, and I realized, as the cavern trembled with ancient power, that saving Rheva had drawn us into something far larger than either of our wars. The depths did not just hide us. They had claimed us. The first guardian tilted its head like a curious bird, and the metal of its neck creaked as if it remembered when it had once been spring. I held the rifle low, not leveled, not surrendered, an honest posture in a room where nothing had the decency to be simple. The machine shapes fanned in a loose crescent between us and the great lattice that filled the cavern. Their bodies stitched from scavenged plates and bone-thin braces, their faces hidden behind cracked visors that glowed with the same green as the core. Some walked on 2 legs, some on 3, some on limbs that reconfigured with a soft click of intent. Behind me, Rheva lay on the sled, bellows whispering, filaments along her ribs, answering the core's slow light with a faint pulse of their own. Her eyes were wide. Not panic, not yet, but the sobriety of someone who recognizes an old story and knows where it can end. The nearest guardian took a step. It did not carry a weapon so much as it was one edges sharpened by time, joints grown strong from repetition. A panel on its torso flickered, spilled a ribbon of symbols into the air that my translator blinked at and shrugged from. Another guardian repeated the display in a different pattern. The air filled with quiet, glowing questions I could not read. Rheva tried to speak. The translator at my collar caught the timbre and coughed up a word shaped from more than sound. Proximity. Petition, it guessed, as if naming a posture could be a passport. The nearest guardian held still. From within its helmet came a sound, like a chime being bowed instead of struck. The core answered, no louder, no faster. Yet the whole room felt as if it had turned half a degree toward us. "I don't understand," I said, keeping my voice low, my hands visible. "We're not intruders. We're running." The visor tilted toward me. The chime deepened. Another guardian extended an arm whose forearm had been replaced by a hinged lattice of intricately jointed rings. At the edge of the lattice, a fine tendril uncoiled and hovered an inch from my sleeve. I could smell it. Old copper, dust, a mineral sweetness like rain in a place that hadn't seen sky in a century. "It's all right," I told the air, and placed my forearm under the ring. The tendril touched fabric. A soft current passed, not painful, more like being measured by a hand that remembers the way a body should weigh. The lattice brightened a notch. The visor shifted past me toward Rheva. "No," I said reflexively, moving to block. Rheva blinked long, a command, not a plea. She was looking past fear now to a calculus of necessity. I stepped aside the way you do when someone braver than you has already made the choice for both of you. The tendril touched the seam of her armor. The suit thrummed, suspicious. The guardian's rings rotated, finding a frequency. The core answered again. A note so low I felt it more than heard it, arriving up through my boots and into the bones that too often remind me of the weather. The filaments along Rheva's ribs shimmered, then steadied. The tendril moved to the scar line at her temple and hovered there, respectful, a doctor's hand that pauses before the wound. Her eyes flicked to mine. "Hold." The guardian's visor brightened. A projection spilled from the panel on its chest again, this time slower, symbols separated by breaths as if speaking for an old ear. My translator offered nonsense, then a pair of words that felt like an honest attempt. Inquiry. Intention. I set the rifle on the floor and slid it toward the wall with my foot. "Sanctuary," I said. "We seek to pass, We're hunted. A second guardian answered with a new spill of signs. The translator hesitated, as if embarrassed by its own ignorance, then suggested, trespass, damage, debt. The word debt landed with weight. The guardians had not rushed us. They'd measured us instead. They had chosen to talk. That is a kind of mercy. Mercy always wants something. Rheva's lips moved. This time the translator did not even pretend to render the syllables into ours. It played them back without conversion, the way you present a relic because to polish it would be a sin. The guardians froze. For one stretched breath, nothing moved except light. What did you say? I asked. Rheva blinked once. The translator, chastened, groped. Oath shelter, it offered softly. Petition, in old way. The nearest guardian touched its own visor with 2 fingers, a gesture that acknowledged something bigger than itself. Then it turned to the core. The lattice of the machine flexed not visibly, not in any way that a camera would register, but in the way air changes when a bell is rung in a church where people have lately died. A dozen faint lines of green chased one another through the core's veins and converged at a point above us, where they gathered and fell like the idea of rain. The drop struck the stone in front of the sled and did not wet it. It was not water. It was light that had grown tired of being abstract. Where it touched, the floor brightened into a hexagonal pattern, each cell a small well full of dull shine. A platform old, older than the colony's intrusion, older perhaps than Rheva's people. The guardian stepped back a fraction, leaving a path to it as if this were a ritual and we were late to it. Rheva's eyes softened with recognition and fear. A thin sound left her throat. The translator rendered it without confidence. Trial. Repair, it ventured. Tithe. Of what? I asked. She shifted her gaze from the platform to me and back again. Memory, the translator whispered. I tried to breathe that word like air and found it was more like smoke. Mine or yours? Her eyelids lowered, lifted. Both, came the answer, a spare shape of sound that did not betray how much she hated the price. The shallow rage that keeps soldiers alive for longer than is reasonable rose in me and found nothing to hit. My mind went to command above us, to Keeler counting forms, to Raffi inventing of his own body, the soft obstacles that bureaucracies respect. I thought of all the things the war had already asked for. The receipts I carried in my sleep. If a machine that calls itself the core wanted its share, it would get it. The only choice left was whether I name the cost or let it name me. Do it, I said. The guardians parted. The platform's light steadied to a patient glow. I unhooked the harness and slid the sled until its nose touched the nearest hexagon. The filaments along Rheva's arms trembled where they lay next to the pattern and then, cautiously, reached as if tasting for a familiar current. She breathed out tight. Not pain. Not yet. I knelt and put my palm flat on the nearest cell. The surface was cool and faintly textured. Not stone, not metal. Something that desired the company of skin. A small heat rose where my hand lay, and with it a scent that reminded me of when dust first meets rain on a summer road. You can hear people call that petrichor. I only know it as a beginning. The core spoke. It did not use sound this time. It used a pressure behind the eyes, a mapped sensation on the back of the tongue, a feeling I had only ever known in the moment before a blast, when my body knew the shockwave was already here, though my ears argued otherwise. The guardian steadied, shoulders angling like scaffolds, showing us by posture that this was the right kind of fear. Images unfurled, not as pictures are for papers and the news, but as textures and pulses. A green throat opened through a planet's mantle. Machines like the ribs of whales, arranged not by design but by listening until design appeared. A time when the core sang to the crust, and the crust answered by not breaking where people lived. A treaty of uses. Keep the heat where it belongs. Let the storms run in measured lanes. Whisper to the metals so they grow in accessible seams instead of hiding in greedy knots. In response, those who lived above had given what? Songs, names, oaths. A compact of care, no signatures, only repeated acts until trust congealed and was carried like a tool. Singer stones placed at intervals to keep the listening clean. Stewards, hands, and voices. The ancient arrangement felt practical, not sacred, which, in some lights, is more sacred. Then the images soured. New lights came ours, theirs. War rapped on the old agreements as if they were nails. The core had lost collaborators and gained noise. Someone's neurolash had scribed bright wounds through the network, fusing channels that should have flexed. The Guardians had patched what they could and retreated to essentials. Outsiders came, ran, died, forgot. The compact had thinned to a rumor the machines kept repeating to themselves because repetition was a form of hope. The pressure eased. In the hush after, I realized my hand still lay in the hexagon's well, and that my palm burned where the pattern had printed a faint geometry on the skin. I turned it upward. A cluster of hexes gleamed just under the surface like a bruise that had decided to be a constellation. Rheva's eyes were wet. A pulse ran through the filaments at her temple, then down her throat. The Guardian's tendril hovered there and gave a tiny corrective tap. Her left hand damaged, beautiful. Her not hand trembled, then found a finger's worth of movement. The smallest curl, the hardest one. I wanted to shout. Instead, I swallowed the ache in my throat and put my right hand where hers could find it. She laid 2 fingers across my knuckles, weightless as a signature. "What do you take from us?" I asked the Guardians. "The lattice, the air. You spoke of tithe." The visor nearest me brightened, dimmed. Symbols streamed and stalled. The translator tried, fell on its face, stood, and tried again. Promise carried. It said, thin but clear. Carry above, end the lash that severs the listening. A pause. Then, and loan of steps. Loan of, I started, and then understood too quickly and not quickly enough. The Guardian reached with the lattice arm again, not to probe, but to offer. At its wrist, plates folded back, revealing a slender brace the width of 2 fingers and the color of old coin. I did not know what it was until it hummed in a pitch that matched the bruised light pattern under my skin. It wanted me, not as a meal, as a wire. Rheva saw it, and in her eyes came both hope and anger at the gentleness of it. She loathed pity. She would accept help. That is the discipline of the truly strong. "Explain," I said anyway. The core answered by moving through the Guardian's armature into the brace. A line of green woke and ran along it like a vein catching the Sunday. The brace did not ask permission again. It waited, the way a rung waits for a foot. I strapped it onto my forearm and felt nothing but a coolness that carried a shape. The Guardians indicated Rheva's right forearm. Her armor had a panel there, set with a socket I had not noticed, because I had assumed it was decorative. It was not. It was a port, and I am an idiot. "May I?" I asked, and did not move until she blinked long. I slid the brace's tongue into the port. There was a click I felt in my teeth. A circuit closed. Her bellows took one deep, steady breath, and the filaments along her thighs rippled in a sequence I recognized as the rehearsal of a motion. Something woke in my own arm, not a force, but an echo. When I flexed my wrist gently, her leg flexed less gently, as if my movement had been amplified and translated across a grammar I could not read but could feel. I opened my hand. Her hip twitched. I closed my hand and felt her knee answer. "Borrowed steps," the translator said. So soft I might have imagined it. "Take them," I said. We practiced in slow, reverent increments. 2 of the Guardians shifted to my side, acting as rails with their bodies. One took the sled's weight. I leaned, braced, lifted, guided. And Rheva stood. It was not grace. It was not a miracle. It was physics paid in small bills of attention. Her mouth clenched with concentration and something like grief at being vertical with such cost. She did not make a sound. We took 1 step. My forearm trembled. The pattern under my skin warmed as if remembering a dance someone else had taught it. Her foot placed itself, sure enough for the moment, and that's all that matters in any first. We took a second step. Something above us boomed stone, or doctrine refusing to be flexible in the face of subtraction. The guardians did not look up. The core did not hurry its pulse. We took a third step and paused, because dignity is measured in the willingness to rest without apology. A voice wandered down from the world we had for the moment chosen not to inhabit. Keeler, distant, filtered, furious in a way that only lives because it loves an order more than a person. "Sniffers lost the trail," she snapped. "Widen the grid. Raffi, take a 4 and run the east adits. If you see a hex glow, don't touch anything." Raffi's reply was wetter, closer to laughter than a man in his position had any right to go. "Copy," he said, and I could hear the scuff of his boot in my head, the way it always told the ground, "Be kind to me and I'll be kind back." "Time," I told the guardians. And they must have had a word in their private grammar that meant the same, because the ring arm gestured toward a seam in the far wall where the glow pooled more thickly, a door I would not have seen if someone hadn't taught me how to notice. The seam parted as we approached, not dramatically, not like a mouth, more like two rocks that had always aimed to part once someone worthy arrived to need them to. A corridor sloped away, narrow at first, then widening until I could imagine it becoming air and light. "Where?" I asked. The guardians spilled signs, left them to hover like moths. The translator made a decent fist of it. "Riverbed, dead water, shade." "The dry river," I repeated. I knew the place, an old wash to the west of the colony bones, a scar where the water had been argued out of its course by politics and drought. Drones seldom swept it, nothing warm lived there long. "Perfect." "Promise carried," the translator added, insistent as a finger on a map. "I hear you," I said. "The lash." We ended. Rheva's eyes sharpened. This, too, she understood. The neurolash that had torn her body into stillness had been a convenience that both sides had used and pretended to mourn. It had also made places like this impossible to tend. We had broken the listeners and then complained that the ground did not hold still when our buildings wanted it to. "How?" I asked the core. The guardians answered with an image that even my illiterate mind could understand. A web with 3 bright knots. I felt the location more than I saw it. One near the colony's old power farm. One under what had been a market before the fighting mapped it out of viability. One at the edge of the ridge where the irrigation pipes lay like ribs through thin skin. Each knot was small. Each was also the right size to be undone by a hand with a pattern burned into it. I looked at my palm. The hex bruises glowed like a quiet agreement. Rheva pressed 2 fingers into my hand in a pressure so slight it could have been a tremor. "Together," the translator guessed, uncertain only because it was polite. "Together," I said. The nearest guardian stepped in front of me then, and for the first time since we'd met it, laid a hand mechanical, light against my chest. The gesture had the intimacy of a benediction and the practicality of a warning. Symbols spilled. "Mark fades," the translator said. "Breaths, 1,000. A borrowed clock. Enough to go, if we did not stop to argue." "Understood," I said. I tightened the brace's strap, took Rheva's weight again, and we turned toward the seam. "Ward." The voice was not the guardian's. It was that other weather that followed me everywhere I had been uniformed. It came clean down the corridor we'd just opened. Keeler, and close enough now that the cavern's acoustics did not have to translate her into myth. I turned, reflex, and guilt. She stood in the mouth of the chamber, 5 meters up the slope we had negotiated by borrowed light and stubbornness. Raffi was a shadow behind her shoulder, head turned not toward me but toward the guardians, as a man sensibly respects where the immediate danger is. Keeler took in the tableau, me braced. Rheva upright and leaning not like a patient, but like a partner. The guardians poised in a shape that made a wall without admitting to being one. The core slow as night at our backs. She lowered her pistol because she is not stupid. Her face made no theater. Only the corner of her mouth changed. Not a smile. The expression a woman wears when she figures out the last number in a ledger and knows it will be read and will also be right. "You're walking her," she said. It was not a question. With a toy you cheated out of a relic you don't understand. Yes. And you're going to keep walking. Yes. She studied me for 3 heartbeats. Then she turned her head half a degree, enough that Raffi could see her eyes, and I could not. Trip a line, she said conversationally. Make a mess. I need to write a sentence that uses the word obscured. Raffi's boot scuffed in the exact way required to satisfy an auditor. A length of old steam conduit snapped from its mooring as if it had been waiting for the invitation, and exhaled a dense, white lungful into the room. The beam of Keeler's shoulder lamp struck the fog and died unhappy. The guardians did not move. The Corps did not notice. Keeler looked back to where she had last calculated my face would be, and tilted her chin just enough to be read as what it was. Go. Thank you, I said. The words did not feel like betrayal. They felt like bookkeeping in a currency I had only recently bothered to learn. Don't die in a hole, she said, which is a thing officers say to enlisted when they mean, keep your hands where I can say I warned you. Raffi did not look at me. His hand brushed his thigh where the flashbang would have been, and I smiled because muscle memory is its own form of prayer. We turned. The seam adjusted wider, anticipating the geometry of our departure the way good doors do. The corridor beyond tasted of dust that had not seen boots in a generation. We went. The guardians flowed with us for a dozen paces, then stopped at the point where Stone began to forget the Corps' language. The one with the lattice arm extended it again and pressed the barest edge of its ring to my brace. A faint tick. A pebble, not stone, not metal, something that wanted to hum fell into my palm. Singer stone, no bigger than a tooth. Hush, the translator suggested gently. Carry. I slid it into the interior pocket of my jacket, the one that had held a letter for too many years. The weight was wrong and perfect. I adjusted Rheva's arm on my shoulder and felt the brace relay my thought to her hip, my grip to her knee. We moved like a single, slightly clumsy animal. Borrowed, she whispered. Not apology, not complaint. While you heal, I answered. Then you'll teach me how to move properly. A breath that might have been a laugh. The corridor bent left, then right, then widened into a rough vault. Somewhere ahead, a ribbon of light sketched itself along a crack where day waited. Behind us, muted by Singer Stone. The hunt argued with guardians and with itself. Above us, a world we had not given up on yet considered whether it wanted us back. We reached the last bend and stopped because awe has its own gate. The seam opened into the ribs of the dry river, a gully of powder and rock under a sky bleached white with heat. Shadows lay where the ribbed pipes arched, relics of the old irrigation grid. Wind moved the skin of the dust without committing to anything complicated. Rheva leaned on me and looked up. She closed her eyes. The sun on her face turned the pallor of her skin into something that had color, not because pigment had returned, but because the world had decided to call her by a better name. 1,000 breaths, I said, counting without counting. She touched my jaw with the 2 fingers she could command, a contact so light it barely qualified as touch, and so exact it might as well have been a vow written with a fine brush. Then, run, she said. Then run? I agreed. We stepped into the light, 2 fugitives and a borrowed promise, carrying in our bones and a small humming stone the last honest request of an old machine. The Corps had not blessed us, it had enlisted us. The difference mattered. It also felt like grace. The riverbed took our footprints the way a ledger takes ink. Ahead, the ridge where the irrigation pipes spined, the slope waited, one knot of lash hidden among ribs I already knew too well. Behind, fog and doctrine courted one another in a cave that would not remember their names. Between, we moved in a rhythm that was ours and not. A dance learned in an hour and, if we lived, meant to last the rest of my life. We did not look back. We didn't have to. The Corps kept listening. The guardians kept the door. And the singer stone in my pocket hummed a line I could not yet sing but could follow. The way you follow a voice you love through a crowd, because you have already decided to know it anywhere. The dry riverbed stretched before us like a scar the earth refused to heal. The heat pressed down, flattening sound, thinning breath. Each step Elias took was mirrored through the brace. They looked clumsy from afar, maybe even fragile, but to them, each step was a covenant. We are still here. Behind them, the tunnels slept again under the song of the core. The guardians had returned to their vigil. Command's voices had faded into the rock, muffled, swallowed. The chase was not over, Elias knew that, but for now, distance was their ally, and the weight of ancient machines had bought them silence. The ridge loomed ahead, the irrigation pipes jutting like ribs under torn flesh. Elias remembered this place vividly. It was here he'd first seen the strange glimmer that had led him to Rheva. Now it waited as both beginning and end. We've come full circle, Elias whispered, sweat streaking his face. Rheva's lips moved. The translator hesitated, then caught the word. Test. Yes, Elias said, jaw tightening. The core showed us 3 knots of the neurolash. This is one. The brace on his forearm pulsed faintly, hex patterns glowing against his skin. When he flexed his hand, he felt it not just the physical strain, but a tug deeper, as if the earth itself were listening, waiting for him to make a choice. They reached the base of the ridge. The first knot lay half-buried, where shattered concrete met old pipe. A faint shimmer distorted the air above it, like heat mirages, but colder the residue of neurolash energy that still bled into the ground. Elias crouched. The singer stone in his pocket vibrated, humming softly, resonating with the pattern in his palm. He placed his hand against the knot. Pain surged instantly, white, electric, like touching a live wire with his veins. He gasped, teeth gritted, refusing to pull away. Rheva cried out, her own body spasming faintly through the brace. Her fingers twitched harder than before, curling into his wrist as if to steady him. Their pain was shared, fused through the circuit the core had forged. And then the stone sang. A low tone, pure, steady, filled the air. The shimmer broke apart, unraveling into threads of green light that sank harmlessly into the ground. The neurolash knot dimmed, then vanished. The earth shuddered not violently, but with relief. One down, Elias whispered, collapsing against the pipe, chest heaving. Rheva blinked once, long and deliberate. Her gratitude needed no translator. The second knot lay near the remains of the colony's power farm. They reached it at dusk, the sky painted in bruised reds and grays. Towers of rusted steel jutted like gravestones, humming faintly with echoes of energy they no longer carried. This knot was worse. It pulsed visibly, a raw wound of green light, arcs sparking across broken conductors. Elias approached, heart hammering. His hand shook as he pressed the pattern into it. This time the pain was deeper, dragging memories with it. He saw the boy they had abandoned years ago, pinned in rubble, his voice hoarse from calling for help until silence took him. He saw the line of soldiers walking away, himself among them, obeying orders. The neurolash forced every failure back into him, as if feeding on regret. Rheva's voice cut through, thin but fierce. Her hand, trembling, found his. Strength passed between them, not in muscle, but in will. Elias roared, forcing the pattern deeper. The singer stone in his pocket flared, and the knot ruptured. Light spilled upward, dispersing into the dying sky like sparks. The power farm exhaled one last hum and went still. Elias fell to his knees, trembling. Rheva's breath came steadier now, her eyes sharper, her control spreading further down her arm. You're healing, Elias whispered, piece by piece. Her lips shaped one word. The translator caught it. Together. The third knot waited at the farthest edge of the valley, beneath the broken ridge where the war's first shells had fallen. The ground there was scarred, jagged, as though the earth itself had refused to close its wounds. Night cloaked them as they approached. The stars above were hard, pitiless things. Elias felt Command's eyes in them, even if no drone circled. The hunt hadn't ended They were simply waiting for the right moment. The final knot glowed faintly at the ridge's base, buried beneath layers of stone. Elias dropped to his knees, scraping with his hands until blood mixed with dust. He pressed his palm to the knot, the hex patterns on his skin blazing brighter than before. This time, the pain was almost unbearable. Images crashed through him. The faces of his squad, Keeler's voice, Rafi's half-smile, the tribunal that surely waited. Every oath he'd ever spoken weighed on him, demanding he return, obey, surrender. "I can't," Elias gasped. Then Rheva moved. Her leg twitched, not from his brace, not from his guidance. Her own muscles fired, weak but real. With monumental effort, she shifted, her hand pressing over his against the knot. Her voice came ragged but clear. "Not alone." The knot broke. Light erupted upward, not green this time, but white, pure, blinding. It rushed into the sky, scattering the clouds, painting the ridge in silver fire. The ground stilled. The neurolash was gone. Silence followed, vast and reverent. Elias sagged against Rheva, their foreheads nearly touching. The brace hummed softly, then dimmed the borrowed steps no longer needed. Rheva's body trembled, but her arm moved again, curling around his shoulder with fragile defiance. "You're standing," Elias whispered, awe choking his throat. Rheva's eyes shone. The translator spoke her word in a voice steadier than her own. "We." Above, in the distance, Elias saw lights flicker, drones circling, command regrouping. But something had changed. The earth beneath them was no longer poisoned by the lash. The core was listening again. The Guardians would not let command enter easily. And Elias? He was no longer just a soldier. He was oath-bound, debt-marked, chosen by a machine older than their wars, and tied irrevocably to the alien warrior beside him. He looked at Rheva, her hand gripping his shoulder, her legs trembling but alive. "What now?" he asked softly. Her lips curved faintly, the closest thing to a smile he had seen. The translator caught the word and rendered it with quiet certainty. "Run." Elias smiled back, for the first time in years. "Then, let's run." Together, under a sky split with new light, they stepped into the future the core had demanded of them, fugitives, guardians, lovers of a world that was still learning how to heal. The desert was different now. At dawn, the wind carried not just dust but a low resonance, a subtle vibration that hummed in stone and bone alike. To most it was nothing, just the sigh of heat through the valleys. But Elias knew better. He had felt the core's voice inside his chest, and now the whole land pulsed like a heart rediscovering its beat. They had fled through the dry riverbed in the dark, leaving command's searchlights tangled in the tunnels behind. No shots fired, no final confrontation, just distance growing wider with every step. And yet Elias knew they hadn't escaped forever. Command would regroup, Keeler would write her report, Rafi would twist his words into omissions that shielded as much as they betrayed. Sooner or later, the uniform he had shed would come looking for him again. But he also knew this: he would not run alone. Rheva sat beside him on a ridge of stone, the morning sun brushing her pale skin with the faintest warmth of color. She was still weak, her body stiff and reluctant, but she could move on her own now, halting steps, fingers curling with effort, her voice carrying syllables the translator struggled less and less to interpret. Each motion was fragile, unfinished. Each was a miracle. "You listen," she whispered, eyes half closed, head tilted as if to catch a hidden melody. Elias stilled. At first he heard only the desert, sand shifting, wind pressing, the faint creak of old pipes in the valley below. Then, under it all, faint but sure, came the hum. The core's song. A thread of sound so low it was almost a feeling, binding the ground together again. "I hear it," he said softly. Her gaze turned to him, steady, luminous. "Then you, Keeper, now." The words settled heavier than armor. He had been many things: soldier, deserter, fugitive but never a keeper. Yet the word fit. He had carried her when no one else would. He had carried the Corps' promise, branded into his palm. He would carry it still. "What about you?" Elias asked. "What are you now?" Rheva blinked once, slow, her lips curling faintly. "Alive," the translator said, but her voice carried more than the device could. Alive and not alone. On the horizon, faint plumes of dust marked command patrols, sweeping the edges of the valley. Too far to threaten yet, close enough to remind them of the world waiting. Elias clenched his fist, the hex pattern on his palm still glowing faintly beneath the skin. "They won't stop," he murmured. "No," Rheva agreed. Her hand brushed his wrist, light but deliberate. "So, neither do we." The sun climbed, warming the scarred land, gilding their figures on the ridge. Two fugitives, bound not by orders or nations but by choice, carrying between them the last true oath of a forgotten world. The Corps' hum deepened, spreading outward through stone and sky, a promise whispered into the bones of the earth. Carry each other, or fall apart. Elias stood, reaching for Rheva's hand. She gripped it, weak but steady, and together they stepped down from the ridge toward the uncertain road ahead. The hunt was not over. The war was not healed. But something older than both had begun to sing again, and for the first time, Elias believed they could learn the words.